Okay, so On Connection by Kay Tempest. It's either a short book or a long essay, depending on your point of view. So I reread it to prepare for this session. I read it properly, and it took less than an afternoon. So it doesn't take long. It's quite concentrated. And in terms of what it's about, if you do the next slide, please, Andy. There's a clue in the title. This is a book about connection, not surprisingly. So this is the book described in the author's own words. So it's a book about connection, about how immersion in creativity can bring us closer to each other and help us cultivate greater self-awareness. And I think that's quite a timeless definition of the book. That's what you'll get if you pick this book up and read it in 3 or 5 or 10 years' time. But I think if you pick it up now, you get something else on top of that. There's like an added layer of poignance from the times that we've all been through over the last 3 years. So if you go to the next slide, please, Andy. Because the book was written in lockdown by Kay Tempest, who's a performing artist, and they were obviously denied the live audience that their whole career has been based on. So there's a sense of loss and melancholy that pervades the whole book. And I think it's an amplified version of the loss that we all felt in our own ways. But because Tempest is a poet, a spoken word artist, a rapper, a novelist and a playwright, I'm quite jealous, very talented person, they express that loss in gorgeous, gorgeous language. I'll just read a quick passage in their words. So, all the things that we always knew were good for the soul take on new relevance now, when the soul is trapped in concrete and glass, weary from overstimulation and underwhelmed by every encounter. And the book is full of that kind of stuff. There's like a lyrical quality to all of the prose. And it struck me when I was reading it again, it's got a lot in common with a really great song. So if you have a really great song, the songwriters obviously poured their own meaning into the lyrics, but a really great song is kind of porous, and it can soak up the meaning that everyone that listens to it pours into it as well. And I think this book works like that. It works like a great song. If you go to the next slide, please, Andy. It's about a lot more than 5 things. So what I do when I'm reading the book is I dog ear the bottom of a page that I want to go back to afterwards. And as you can see here, there's a lot more than 5 dog-eared pages in this book. And I guess that's the analog version. If you go to the next slide, please, Andy. This is the digital version. So this is my second brain. It was really uncanny that Anna talked about second brain. I use this thing called Roam Research, which is built up into like my own personal Wikipedia. And down at the bottom left there in that red circle, there's like a blue, I don't know how well you can see it over Zoom. There's like a blue node, and that's the page for On Connection. And what I've done is I've taken all those dog-eared pages and I've transcribed the relevant passage. And then I've added my own thoughts and reflections to that. And then I've cross-tagged it with all the other ideas. So each of the blue lines radiating out from that node is how On Connection connects to another idea in another page. So it's things like creativity, mental health, capitalism, collaboration, storytelling, empathy, inequality, tone of voice. There's a lot of concepts in this book, as you can see from each of those blue lines. And I had to choose 5. If we go on to the next slide, I'll share the 5 things that I chose out of all the options. All of these are in inverted commas, so every heading on these slides is in the author's words. So the first one is creativity encourages connection. And what this is about, Tempest says that creativity is an act of love. And that applies whether you are writing a poem, but it also applies if you're frying onions or if you're painting a windowsill. These are all acts of creativity. They're all acts of love. And it's through these creative acts of love that we develop self-awareness. And that self-awareness is the essential foundation for connecting properly with other people. So it didn't take me long to explain that, but there's quite a lot of significance concentrated into that one idea. And I think the whole book is like that. It's really concentrated meaning in every single idea. So that was thing one. If we go to thing two, please. So naked language has a humanizing effect. And this is about vulnerability and authenticity, and how when you trust someone else with your story, it has a really disarming effect, and people's defenses go down, and people open up, and you create the conditions to discover that what connects us is much more powerful than what divides us. And I think we all kind of know that, but it still feels like an act of bravery to actually do it. And obviously Tempest does it every night, and it's quite a raw experience. But again, I think it's a really important idea in these times you live in, where everything seems to be quite binary and really hostile. This idea that by being vulnerable, we can actually find that we've got more in common than maybe we were aware of. So a second really important idea that doesn't take long to describe, but it's a really significant. So thing three, please, Andy. So performance, excuse me, performance is a deep art. Tempest is obviously a professional performer, but they contend that we all live performative lives, and we're all performing all the time on various stages, be they physical stages or metaphorical stages, including social media. But unlike Tempest, we're all amateurs, and we don't know how to prepare for performance, and we don't know how to come down from a performance. In fact, we're probably not even aware that we're performing. We don't know how to create boundaries between our performative lives and our non-performative lives. And in Tempest's view, that's quite unhealthy, bordering on dangerous. And there's quite a lot in the book about how performing all the time can take its toll on a human being. A quite poignant section of the book, because she obviously feels that, they obviously feel that really deeply. So that's thing three. Thing four, craft is the hard work, connection, the reward. The idea here is that connection, when it happens, is a kind of communal and collaborative thing. And you can't make it happen. Even if you're a professional performer like Tempest, never knows if connection is going to happen when they go out on stage. You can't force it. All you can do is do the hard work and put the conscious effort into your craft. And by putting that hard work in, focusing on the craft day in, day out, lo and behold, it makes it more likely that connection will happen. And Tempest talks about finished work, and says that finished work is the main thing that differentiates an artist from someone who aspires to be an artist. So it's that graft of focusing on the craft and actually getting the work out. And if you do that repeatedly, then you've got a greater chance of forging a connection with somebody else or an audience. That's thing four. And then the last thing, thing five, there is a depth of honesty to the live exchange that a screen immediately defeats. Tempest's perspective on this is obviously transparent. They're a live performer. They need whatever they get from the interaction with a live audience. And when they're denied that live audience, the sacrifice, the compromise, they feel it intensely. And in the book, they talk about what it was like during lockdown, trying to forge some kind of connection over technology, over screens. And for someone like Tempest, that's an unsatisfactory experience. And they talk about how, compared to being person to person, face to face, a screen tends to close doors rather than open them. So I think there's food for thought in this book for all of us, because we're all wrestling with working from home, working in the office, hybrid working, what works, what doesn't. Tempest is very clear that for them, they want that face-to-face live experience. But I think there's, regardless of your point of view of the best way of working, there's some really interesting stuff in here about trying to connect over technology and what works and what doesn't. So those are the 5 things, and we can go to the summary screen. So creativity connects you to self as an act of love, and that self-awareness is fundamental to proper connection. Vulnerability and authenticity help us find common ground, so be brave because it works. Performative life takes its toll, especially if you don't know that you're performing all the time. You can feel connection, but you can't force it. All you can do is work on your craft and trust that the connection will happen. And then watching is not connecting. So some food for thought on connecting using technology. So I'm aware that was quite quick, actually, but I think that's a function of the book. It's like sort of lime cordial. It's really heavily concentrated. And I think as the reader, what you do is you pour a little bit into your mental glass and dilute it. And then all that kind of rich meaning comes out when you're reading. But it's beautiful, utterly beautiful. Can't recommend it highly enough.